All right, chat. So we've got Silosa's video here. We're gonna go straight through
changes coming to the here channel. This is one of 2 remaining Director's Take blogs for 2023. We'll release another one in 2 weeks and take the last part of the year off for the holiday season before we pick back up again in the new year. I'll be writing this one in a sort of turkey-induced fever dream, and the next one just after we launch Season 8. This is when we'll release our newest hero, Mauga, along with quite a few balance changes for the game.
Okay.
We'll take a look at those changes and touch on a few other topics as well. So this is the ultimate charge change, and Aaron says this: we're making a general change to the amount of ult charge retained when swapping heroes,
0,
reducing it from 25 to 15%. We do like that this mechanic removes friction when swapping heroes and think that it should still be 15%. However, there is a perception that it's almost always an advantage to counter swap upon dying, and we're lowering this value to see if it has an effect on swap rates.
Perception.
So this is
perception. Why, like, okay, pause. Here, let me find this post. I think I actually have it pinned. Maybe not. Let me see if I can find this. Perception that swapping's better. It is better. And I can find exactly what they said about the game too, where they said in Overwatch 2, their goal was to make it so that the game did not make it so that the game rewarded you for playing what you want and there's less hard counters. And yet they keep this mechanic in the game that lets people swap heroes. So like what are you all trying to do with the game? Right? And this has been my whole problem with Overwatch 2. There hasn't been a clear answer on what they're actually trying to do with 5v5. They made all these claims about 5v5 being better, but letting you play what you want. Overwatch 2, you play what you want. Our PvP does this. And everything they said has been wrong. Literally, every big claim they made about PvP in Overwatch 2 compared to Overwatch 1 has been incorrect. Right?
It's going to slightly help
they should just remove
the
it.
tank matchup, so I'm okay with that. Okay, let's talk about the tank changes coming in Season 8. And Aaron says this: let's look at the changes coming to some of our heroes in Season 8, starting with some of the larger changes coming to our tanks. We released a reworked Roadhog late in Season 7. Roadhog quickly became one of our top performing tanks with a win rate somewhere around 54%. Now that's very high, that is, guys. Normally
that's really
they want
high.
to get this to sort of 50%, but anything over 50% starts getting a bit ridiculous. So Roadhog at 54%,
please
that's
nerf
quite
him.
high.
Please nerf him.
And then Aaron goes on to say, there's been a lot of feedback around his kit, but we're going to hold off from making any changes at the start of Season 8. Mauga has a lot of answers to Roadhog, and we'd like to see where the meta settles a bit before aiming at the mid-season patch for any balance adjustments. And again,
did he say, hold on.
8. Mauga has a lot of answers to Roadhog, and we'd like to see where the meta settles a bit before.
Roadhog will instantly delete Mauga's ult. Did he just... I think that is a bold claim to say that that Mauga counters Hog. So if Mauga can't ult if the Hog's on the other team, because the Hog will save Whole Hog and instantly destroy his ult. So Whole Hog beats that 10 out of 10 times. Hog has free hooks on Mauga, and while Mauga can self-heal on it, he's going to get hooked in the trap, slowed. Maybe he can charge out, but it's a free nade for the Ana. I'm not really sure how that matchup's going to work. And Hog's going to hit every shot on him with a Vate that reduces damage. I do not think that Mauga has answers for Hog. Like, on paper, if you get point blank, I'm not sold on that, though. I'm going to express doubt and say that the ult matchup, at least, absolutely favors Hog. I'm not sold on that. We'll see. We'll see. I'm going to laugh really hard if they wrote that and then Mauga just completely gets gatekept by Hog, which I think actually might happen. I think in my tier list, I underrated Hog, and he's actually A tier.
Of Roadhog, way more than I ever would have played Roadhog before the rework, so it has worked in that regard. I'm actually enjoying the hero a lot now, but there's going to be a lot of people like that, and also it's the new hotness, it's the latest hero to get reworked. People will play the hero, so I guess it does make sense that with a pretty good rework, it will have a decent win rate because a lot of people are playing him. But yeah, 54% is still a bit too high. They probably do want that to come down. But I think it's good news. They are waiting to see how Mauga changes the game up.
He won't.
Yeah,
Mauga will not
Mauga
change the
getting
game.
played into Roadhog.
Unless they buff him.
We might see Roadhog just destroy Mauga. Who knows? But we'll have to wait and see. Because hooking Mauga into you as Roadhog is not the best idea. Because when he's firing both his weapons at you at point blank range, it is bad news. Doomfist gets a buff to his ultimate, but this is kind of a bit crap. So Aaron says this. There are times when Doomfist players use his ultimate purely as an escape. Now, I'll come in there, Aaron, and say they use it all the time as an escape.
Yeah, it's the only way to use it.
It's a little disappointing to activate Meteor Strike and intentionally land on a health pack rather than enemy players. Starting in Season 8, Doomfist will now regenerate 75 health per second while in the air, with slightly increasing the cost of his ult in order to compensate for the buff. Okay, so all they're trying to do here is go, you know what, when you pop your ultimate, you're basically going to be at full health when you land, and hopefully you're a bit more aggressive with that. I mean, yeah, there's a lot wrong with Doomfist, and I don't think this really makes much difference. I mean, it's okay. It's going to let you be more aggressive with the ultimate, which I guess is what they're trying to do.
I don't think it will. Hot take. It's 75 HP a second, he said. So you're just going to be full health when you land? But here's the problem, guys. Like, the longer you hold your Doom ult, like, okay, so here's why this is a dumb change, in my opinion. Well, I don't want to write it off. Okay. Here's why. Here's what I think is going to happen. I don't want to give my opinion on it yet because I don't know. Doom ult, generally, you want to land fast because you usually use it after using all of your CDs to force them in a spot where it might get value, right? So the longer you wait, the more time they have to react with the Suzu, like react with the drone, like reposition from a place you force them into, right? So, I mean, yeah, that if it's 75 health a second, it's definitely going to help. But I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that, to be honest. So you'll probably land at like half HP, maybe more. I don't know how I feel about this because again, it's not about like how you play. It's just passive value, right? I wish they did more things to actually reward people in this game for making smart decisions rather than just having the heroes automatically give it for you. But automatically here's what I'll say. It's absolutely a big buff because you'll just be able to get full health when you land. I don't know how impactful it's going to be though.
But I mean, I don't know. Doomfist is a very complicated hero. I still think though Doomfist is kind of okay at the moment. I know probably diehard Doomfist mains will be like, "What are you talking about, Sty?" But I mean, I've seen him in games and he's been terrorizing games quite effectively. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's okay, right? It's not particularly a mega buff, is it? Ramatra gets buffed, and Aaron says this: tanks are supposed to create space, and when Ramatra is in his base form, he can be a little too easy to ignore. So we're going to shift 100 of his health to armor, as well as slightly increase the size and damage of his projectiles to see if it helps. Okay, so let's start with the projectile change here. I think this could be really big for Ramatra. We're going to have to wait and see how big they actually get.
Wait a minute. The tank was underwhelming, and the only way to make it get played was by buffing the Wazoo out of it? So certain tanks are underwhelming until you have to keep buffing them and buffing them and buffing them.
Could help him because his weapon is kind of annoying to use. So if it's easier to hit, that's probably going to make him more deadly. Well, I mean, it obviously is. That goes without saying. Now, the other change, turning 100 of his health into armor, that's a massive change, and that's going to make him way more tanky because armor reduces damage, and that is going to be... That could make him, more of a threat when he's not in his big tank mode. And again, that's what they're trying to go for. So I think this is okay. I still think Ramatra's problem is you've got Sigma, who's just better in every single way. So
Nerf Sig.
Yeah. Winston gets a buff. That's right. You heard it here. Winston gets a buff. And this is what Aaron says. Winston isn't the best matchup for other tanks. This is part of his kit, but the disadvantage feels too extreme. We'd like to alleviate it a bit. In Season 8, Winston's Tesla cannon get ready for this, will now ignore armor's damage reduction. Now, that is juicy. That is juicy. That means Winston can zap tanks now, and this is going to be something else. Because the problem with Winston is you just couldn't really zap the tanks. You know, and you're not really trying to do that with Winston.
Winston's not bad. Winston's not even bad. He's just not as good as everything else. Oh my God, dude. Welcome. Like, I guess Blizzard said at this point, F it. All these takes are underwhelming. Let's just flavor of the month all of them. That's a huge buff because he's going to be really good against Brigitte. Honestly, I completely disagree with Stylosa here. Zapping tanks as Winston does not matter. The only matchup that this will change anything for Winston is Winston into Rhine comps and Winston into Brigitte. That's it. Right? So I wonder if Weaver replaces Brig in Monkey Dive comps. I doubt it though. Like, this is really only good into Brigitte. That's the only character that's gonna matter. So yeah, don't fall for that. I don't think that's gonna matter too much. But Winston did not need buffs. I think Winston was already good. So at high level play, I think Winston could end up getting played a lot more.
Winston, right? You're trying to dive into the back line.
Nah,
you
not
know.
Diva.
I mean, I'll be honest. I'm only really playing Winston on Dorado, or I'm playing him on Numbani. Sometimes I might play him on Icon
I still think
Vault,
Diva wins that
sort
matchup.
of the second point. But honestly, you know, I'm probably not. I'm probably just playing Sigma all the time. But yeah, this is going to be pretty good for Winston. I can't wait to actually try this because it's going to let you zap the tanks, and that's going to be quite good.
No, it's not.
Okay, let's move on to
the tank health pool in this game. In 6v6, that would be really good. In 5v5, it's not going to matter because the tank's health pools are so high anyway. It's Winston alone isn't going to make a difference. And if you're zapping the tanks as Winston, you're not playing the hero right. So I'm not. What about the Bastion matchup? Doesn't matter. He still gets shredded. Let's see.
Two DPS heroes. So first up is Sombra, and Aaron says this. Moving on to a few of the changes to our DPS heroes. Let's start with Sombra. She's had a lot of moving parts recently, and we feel like she's in a much better spot. Her win rate hovers between 45 and 48% depending on rank. However, her ultimate still isn't as satisfying as it could be.
Yeah, ult is bad.
So we're going to raise the ability lockout time of her EMP by, oh dear, 1.5 to 3 seconds to reduce the amount of damage it does from 30 to 25% of maximum health. This brings her ultimate more in line with her hero fantasy and is much sharper in its effect. Okay.
That won't last 2 weeks. That won't last 2 weeks. Now, it is only on EMP, but that won't last 2 weeks. It might be a Sombra dive meta, which is fun. If Sombra dive ends up being good, that is an insane buff to EMP. Because now you can't just Suzu it, right? It gives you a big window to land viruses. That is a huge buff, and everybody is going to fucking hate it except for the Sombra players. Yeah. I think they should have just increased the damage, but honestly, people are going to hate this, but it's fair against the broken supports because their abilities are so broken, but I wouldn't do either way. I would nerf the broken support abilities, and I wouldn't have EMP do that. Support players are going to hate that, but I have a hard time feeling bad for them. Let's see. Doom Sombra dive, I think Monkey or Doom maybe. It probably is going to be a dive meta, but we'll see what's going to determine the meta are the support changes. Let's see.
Okay, Hero Fantasy. I mean, I don't think there ever goes a dev update without mentioning Hero Fantasy or something about balance about Hero Fantasy.
Also, screw Hero Fantasy. Make the game good, man. Like, you want to talk about Hero Fantasy? Genji has been dog shit for 5 years. You want to talk about Hero Fantasy? What? Dragon Blade has been worthless for years. We want to talk about Hero Fantasy. Why are we only giving the Hero Fantasy to heroes with stuns and EMPs? Why don't we care about the Hero Fantasy for a lot of these other characters? right? Like, that's just, I just think it's ridiculous. I think that's, I think that's just cope, I'll be honest, but I don't know. I think you give Dragon Blade 120 damage and you make it so you can't damage boost Blade. That simple. But, I just find it really funny to see all this talk about hero fantasy, and yet heroes like Genji, who's been fan favorite since launch, when the game was at its peak, Genji was good. And always a fun character, a hero that's slashing motorcycles in half in 2019's trailer for Havana and Storm Rising. And he's slashing giant robots who can't get a single kill with regular Blade, and even sometimes Nano Blade, because supports are so strong, and we want to talk about hero fantasy. Come on, guys. Come on.
It seems to be like it's the trump card.
Blade doesn't do 120. Dragon Blade does 110 damage a swing. Kiriko Headshot with her base kunai is 112.5. Genji Dragon Blade does less damage than a Kiriko crit.
When they want to make a change to, make the hero, I don't know, match its fantasy, you could say. Yeah, so basically this is just Sombra's a hacker, right? So we wanted to hack targets longer. So that's what we're doing. I don't know. I mean, Sombra, I don't feel like Sombra is necessarily great at the moment in the game. I think the rework is kind of not great at all. You compare it to the Roadhog rework, and this in a different...
This will be good.
Not in a different... Sombra is, I don't know, the old Sombra was probably a bit more effective, although very annoying to play against. A difficult one, I think. Soldier 76 gets a nerf because that's just nerf Soldier 76. Now, I don't think people are actually asking for a nerf for Soldier 76, but whatever. I ain't even played him this season, but, this is what Aaron says. Soldier 76 has enjoyed a lot of success in Season 8. He's a really well-rounded DPS, and the self-sustain from his heal can make him really difficult to deal with.
I think they did buff it a while ago, so yeah.
He's in its radius. Rather than reducing the effectiveness of the heal, we'd rather open up larger windows of opportunity by increasing the cooldown from 15 to 18 seconds. That's a pretty big nerf.
Why?
Now, if you are a Soldier player and you play him a ton, I mean, I've played loads of hours of Soldier, but if you are sort of used to that timing in your head when to drop down the biofield, now it's going to be a lot longer. I mean, that's
I don't know if that'll
3
matter.
seconds. That's a long time in Overwatch. Yeah, they just nerfed Soldier. I mean, I don't really think this matters. They shouldn't have really done this. Why nerf Soldier, Blizz? What are you doing? They've probably got stats that indicates he's doing too well, and they want to knock this down. So, I don't know. I don't agree with that. I just think that's just a bit of a hate crime on Soldier, really. The Tracer buff. Now, Tracer, before we get into this, is in a pretty bad place right now. Again, the problem is there are just heroes that are better than Tracer. Sojourn is better in every way than Tracer. She's highly mobile. You get a ton of return. Like, okay, think of it this way. If you put
it's literally just Kiri and Alari. They just switch 2 heroes and Tracer's obsolete. Dive will be meta. If this Tracer buff is created, Dive will be meta. And I will be grinding if Dive is meta. Dive meta is always so much fun.
100 hours into Tracer, you've got to learn some very complex mechanics. You've got to deal with things like Iliari's healing turret, which just is a nightmare for Tracer players. Anyway, if you put those same hours into a Sojourn, for example, you would be a lot more effective. And it's a lot easier, really. I mean, okay, when I say easier, that's subjective, but I just mean there's less mechanics to learn. You're just about raw aim, and Sojourn is very good, and her ultimate's also very good. Tracer's is very difficult to pull off, etc., etc. Anyway, Blizzard are going to buff Tracer because, she was the poster child of Overwatch 1, so they've got to give her some love every now and again. But this is what Aaron says. Does anybody remember how much damage Tracer's pulse pistols do? I wouldn't blame you if you don't. We've changed them a lot. If you guessed 5.5 damage per shot, you would be right, but not for long because we're changing them again. Back to 6. The previous change to 5.5 was made to offset a bug with their fall off and spread. Now those things and the bugs are fixed, we're moving them back to their previous value. Okay, well, the question here is, will this make enough of a difference to break out the Tracer and then try and 1v1 the supports? I mean, I guess the other issue is just supports in Overwatch are very strong. So Tracer, when she tries to fight them, well, they're just as good as Tracer at fighting back. And then they die. So, I don't know. Tracer, I still think is going to be in a bit of limbo. I think it's going to be hard.
I think Tracer Monkey is back. Man, this is what I was scared. I said this too. It's like, don't nerf Tracer, nerf Alari, nerf Kiriko, nerf the problem characters that make her complete dog shit. But we're back at the point where And unfortunately, guys, it's very clear that Overwatch 2 is doing the exact same thing Overwatch 1 did, where they never nerf things properly. Their answer to everything is like, oh, well, we don't know how to nerf this. Let's just buff everything. They've done it with Weaver. They've done it with Tracer. We're 8 seasons into this game now, and it's pretty obvious that that's never going to change. So, yeah, Tracer Sombra Dive might end up being really, really fucking good.
Hard for her to make a comeback just because of the direction the game's going in. And if you want to talk about the strongest DPS right now, you might think I'm a madman for saying this, but I think Mei is probably the strongest DPS right now. She's just a nightmare to deal with.
I think Mei, I think that's only because supports are too good. DPS heroes do not ever make the meta. Supports do.
Obviously, Bastion is still up there, still doing really, really well. Next up are support changes. So first, we're going to talk about Brig, and Aaron says this. Let's look at some of our support changes. Brig was the best performing support hero since the last patch.
Huh. Say that again. Say that again. Hold on.
Some of our support changes. Brig was the best performing support hero since the last patch, and we're seeing your feedback that he's becoming a must pick. We're going to revert the damage on Whipshot to try to bring her back in line. We're also looking at the damage potential of Baptiste and lowering his primary fire ammo from 45 to 36. Okay, so we've got both Brig and we've got both BAP in that small paragraph there. Now, Brig is, I don't think Brig's flying under the radar because Brig, Aaron says, she's literally the best performing support hero since the last patch. Brig is a absolute monster. She is a giga chad in the game right now. I don't even think reverting the damage on Whipshot is going to make any difference. She is a tank.
Well, it actually will matter because Tracer's good now. So Whipshot is less threatening to Tracer.
A beast. She is just incredible. She's so good. It's so easy to get a healing. It's just, I don't know. She's really good. Her ultimate as well, really good. Brig, she's a bit of the complete package at the moment. And she's kind of a bit of a hack. If you do want to rank up pretty quick in support, just play Brig.
Literally,
I don't think this is going to make much of a change to her power level, so get stuck into it. Now, the other thing is BAP. Now, the big thing here is they're looking at reducing his damage. So, I'll read this again, but the damage potential of Baptiste and lowering his primary fire ammo from 45 to 36, so less primary fire. Again, the issue, and I did kind of touch on this a little bit earlier in the video, but the supports do so much damage now. You know, when Tracer tries to take them on, supports can easily deal with them, but BAP is the extreme of this because BAP can just do as much damage as a DPS in the game anyway
over time,
while healing. And of course, his ultimate is really good to use on himself because it just turns him into a killing machine.
Over time,
so BAP, I think, is still going to be a problem. I think the issue with
I think the biggest issue for support damage is Kiriko and Illari. But BAP's damage over time is good, right? The burst of Kiri and Illari is what's crazy.
Though, yes, he does a lot of damage.
And even Briggs Whipshot combo.
Everybody keeps talking about this. I know I've talked about this a lot, but it's the triple health pool thing with BAP, where you've got his health.
He's a tank.
Then you've got his health when he pops regenerative field. Of course, he heals himself. Then, of course, you've got Lamp, which is just, another health bar to shoot at. So he's very hard to kill. He's very good at dealing with a lot of threats on the battlefield. He's very good at negating, high value abilities. He can just basically cancel a lot of ultimates, cancel a lot of very good abilities just by dropping down Lamp. Very powerful hero. Now, Aaron talks about quick play and levers in quick play, so let's break down what he says here. I'd like to touch on one of the items mentioned in the last
we don't care.
People. They're not that I've thought about them.
Is that it?
And levers. It's good to see some of the, I guess, interesting ones highlighted there would have been. It's not the Doomfist one, I don't know, and then the list goes on.
Okay, so let's talk about this. All right. I think the most interesting changes are without a doubt the tank changes, right? We're back at the same place where things aren't getting nerfed, but everything's just getting buffed, right? The answer, instead of nerfing supports, has become we're going to buff the other roles to be able to compete with these supports, right? The Brig Revert was good. They buffed Whipshot for no reason. It was already insane. I've said this since the game came out. I've said this since the hero came out. Brigitte has always been good. Always. Always been insane. She's always been one of the best characters in the game, right? I think the biggest winner is Winston. I think I would love to see a monkey meta because whenever monkeys meta, the game is fun. So those Sombra changes are not going to last more than 2 weeks. And if the meta becomes monkey and Sombra with those EMP changes, I don't think Doom gets played that much. on a Kiri probably, or on a Brig. I think if it becomes dive, Ana's going to get played a lot. But Tracer got a big buff too. That 6 damage a pellet is huge, and it should help her deal with these supports. And this is where I just get nervous, guys, because here's the thing, man. All of these heroes are having to get buffed because the devs did not nerf supports properly. It's been the same thing. Like, instead of like changing pylon right, or changing, like, I think the Weaver changes were okay. Like, you know, we're now at the place where to get these tanks diversified, you're just gonna have to keep buffing them and buffing them and buffing them. And the stronger that these heroes get at their base, the less it becomes about how you play, and the more it is about what you pick. And then we're right back at that same thing where it's like, okay, well, Overwatch 2, you can play what you want, and that's just a 5v5 roll-lock issue. So, I don't know. I think that if the meta ends up being dive, the game will definitely be more fun. But man, you got to feel bad for these Mercy players. I think Mercy might be the biggest loser on this patch, with Winston being better into tanks in general, into Briggs armor, and Tracer being better as well. Like, it's really, really funny. I'm not sure how much this is going to change a lot of different things, but you got to feel for these Mercy players, because they're going to get smoked. Mercy players are going to be down astronomical on this patch, which I think this is going to be really, really funny. So, yeah, Blizzard, again, we gotta buff every tank, right? But we will see, guys. We will see.